So we have with us today Mr. Dinesh Thakur, who is a renowned public health activist and known for bringing to light the infamous Ranbaxy scandal in India and the US. Just now, his book, The Truth Pill, The Myth of Drug Regulation in India is releasing, and it comes at a time, unfortunately, when in Gambia, 66 kids have died due to adulterated cough syrups supplied by an Indian drug maker. So, Mr. Thakur, my first question to you would be, what were your first thoughts when you heard about this Gambia tragedy that has happened due to adulterated medicines?
Thank you, Sumi, for coming over all the way from Noida to talk to us about this. This book actually is written by both me and my co-author, Prashant Reddy. I was actually in a flight, I was coming here. We had planned to release this book on the 15th, but then this news broke, and unfortunately, what can I say? This is something that should have been avoided. It was a simple enough thing if you actually took precautions and followed good manufacturing practices. And as we've seen in India, we've had 5 such mass poisoning events in India as well, right? So it seems like we haven't learned anything from all the things that have happened. Most recently, we saw a similar kind of situation in Jammu in 2019. But it appears that we haven't learned anything from that incident.
So your book is also, based on the wrongs which probably led to in the recent incident. What systemic, issues do you think should be corrected immediately to stop tragedies like this?
Well, I think there are a couple of the issue is so complex that there's not a single answer that I can give you. I mean, the reason why we spent the last 3 years researching and writing this book is there are so many parts of this puzzle that come together. I mean, India, as you know, is one market. As a country, we can sell products anywhere in any state, right? But then we have the regulatory structure that we have, right? It's very fragmented. We have 38 regulators. Every state has its own regulator. Union territories have their own. And then there's one central regulator. And so between all of these, cracks develop, right? If you think about how our regulation evolved ever since we became independent. Now, remember, Drugs and Cosmetics Act, the governing law for medicines in our country, is a pre-independence, legislation, right? This was enacted in 1940. And then over a period of time, changes have been made to that, So most recently in 2019, we had the new drugs and clinical trial rules that came into the picture, right? So just like that, a lot of these things have evolved over a period of time. Now, to answer the question that you're asking, what is the one thing that needs to change? I think that the one thing that, in our research, what we found is that if we introduce transparency, right, the entire structure works in a very opaque manner. Let's just look at the way that this incident, how we as a country are responding to this incident in Gambia. There is no dispute that it was cough syrup made by a Haryana-based company. There's absolutely no dispute about that, right? But look at the way that the government and the regulator have responded so far, right? There is absolutely no transparency in the way the responses are. And we are actually making it worse by saying that, oh, you know what, it is not being sold in our country, it's only made for export, as if it's okay to try and cause trouble overseas, and somehow that makes it okay, right? And so what I'm saying is that there is really no think about journalists like you. If an incident of this nature happens, there isn't a single database that you can go and query and find out what is the pedigree of this company. Has this company been cited for similar incidents in the past, right? What, as any state pointed out, that this company's products have been substandard. There isn't that information available, right? So how do you hold the regulators accountable if you don't have this kind of information? So transparency, in my mind, is number one, reform that we need in the system to make the people who work for the citizens of India more accountable to these people, when things like this happen.
Yeah. You mentioned the Drug and Cosmetic Act in India, which is the pre-independence legislation that's been ruling the drug industry in India. Incidentally, the government is also trying to probably bring a new law in that front. I'm sure you have written about it in the book also. But for our viewers, can you please help us understand what is wrong with the law and what are the reforms which should have been there in the draft but which are not there?
So think about, when the law was enacted in 1940, right? this was before we were independent. We didn't really have any, capacity in the country to research medicines, right? We were essentially manufacturing stuff. So when the law was written, because the federal structure of India's union of states, right? The responsibility for import and export of medicine was with the central regulator. And the responsibility for licensing local manufacturing was with individual states, right? So each state and province essentially got the ability to hand out manufacturing licenses to the manufacturing facilities in those states, right? But this was before independence, before India was a union of, before we became a country, right? In those days, we had princely states, we had provinces, right? And they wanted to control, what was happening in their remit, right? They wanted to derive licensing revenue, tax revenue from that. But when we became a union, India became one market. So, in our country, the biggest manufacturing is in Himachal Pradesh, Baddi, because it's an excise-free zone, right? But the medicine that is manufactured in Himachal makes its way, for all the way from Tamil Nadu to Mizoram in a few weeks.
And of course, outside as well.
Outside of India as well, right? So the point here is that this makes it very difficult because the enforcement of the quality of medicine is largely done by the state regulators. So in this case, when you're talking about the Gambian situation, the medicine cough syrup that was made by this company, so when we did a little bit of digging, we found out that in Kerala and in Gujarat, this company's products were found to be substandard, right? But think about this.
On many occasions.
On many occasions, right? And then Bihar, public procurement had actually blacklisted this company because their products were of good quality. But the point here is that each individual regulator can do that in their remit. The regulator in Gujarat or Kerala is not able to effect change in the manufacturing facility because it's located in Himachal, right? It's a jurisdictional issue at that point in time. All they can do is write a letter, right? Or make a recommendation to the Himachal regulator saying, look, we found a problem with product manufactured by one of your companies, you need to investigate. But the track record of Himachal Pradesh, because they value licensing revenue more than the quality of what they make, they just throw it away. They don't do anything about it. I mean, I'll just give you an example. Yesterday in the morning, or this morning I read that the accused in the 2019 mass poisoning with diethylene glycol with this company called Digital Vision, which was based in Himachal, right? They still haven't been charge sheeted.
That's right. It's been 3 years.
It's been 3 years now. So think about that, right? If that is the kind of enforcement that we are talking about, what is the fear among these companies to make, substandard product and sell it anywhere else that they want?
Very correct. Yeah. One thing that many, people in the pharma industry, of course, say, then pharmacologists and people in the regulators say the problem here probably is with the compliance, not with the law. Do you agree with that?
Oh, it's both. It's both, right? Compliance definitely is a problem. And we see this, this example that I just told you about, yes, right? This is about, if you already know, if you've established through your investigation that this company called Digital Vision had actually supplied cough syrup with 1/3 made of the ethylene glycol, which caused the death of these 12 children. Once that was established upon investigation, something should have been done by, for that, right? So obviously, compliance is a major issue. But law also is an issue. I'll give you a simple example, right? So for example, if you have if you find out that there's a bad batch of drug out there, right? Typically what would happen is the country's drug regulator would actually effect a recall, right? I mean, if I went and bought medicine from the medical store here, I may have consumed 2 tablets out of the 10 that came in the blister pack, right? But after consuming 2, if I find out that that drug is of substandard quality, I would go back to the pharmacist, return it, and find something else, right? That is of good quality. But that will only happen if I know that I have to do that. In our law, under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act, we do not have a legislation for recalling a product, right? So if there's no law, how can I, fault, the regulators for not complying with the law, right? So the question that you're asking, there is a problem with the law. There's a problem with the way that we implement and enforce the law.
There are drug quality issues in developed countries also. For instance, we keep hearing that, some drugs are being recalled in the US, for instance. In that case, because there is this narrative, if you may say that that, because India largely produces a generic drug makers, so, these issues are more highlighted in India. Do you agree with that point of view? What do you think is the biggest difference between the US and India?
Look,
monitoring.
You recall a product because, it is obviously not, the quality of the product has degraded, right? So think about this. Why does recall happen in the first place? It happens because first, when the product ships from the manufacturing facility to the market, over a period of time, it's possible the product may degrade, right? You have stability studies to essentially monitor the quality of the product during transit and the shelf life of the particular product. There have been cases where, not just product made in India, but product made elsewhere as well, that could degrade, and you will affect a recall. The problem is not affecting a recall. The problem is, what do you do once you decide that you need to recall, right? You have to have a procedure to essentially make sure that you trace every batch of the product in the market, find a way to collect all of that, destroy it, right? And replace that with another batch of product. So that is the issue. The issue is not about India-made product or a US-made product. I mean, look, with heparin, what happened, several years ago in the United States, where there were 6 deaths because of contaminated heparin, the ingredient came from China. It was a contaminated chondroitin sulfate that was used to manufacture heparin by Baxter in Chicago. It was given to 6 patients, and 6 patients died. It had nothing to do with India. The point here is that these are medicines. You will run into problems. You have to have a regulatory framework to address those things. What we are talking about here is that we just don't have that capacity within our law to be able to do it. So,
yeah. India's professional regulator for doctors, for instance, says that largely doctors should prescribe generic medicines.
I agree with that.
Then doctors are sometimes villainized because they go for branded drugs, prescribe branded drugs, and it has own issues because there are issues of fixed dose combinations which are sometimes not scientific. So in that case, what is the proper way out for doctors so that there is not a problem either for patients or doctors or the quality of medicines?
The trouble with medicine, right, it's not a black and white issue, right? Medicine can behave differently in your body when it's given to you compared to my body, because my body weight is different, my composition is different. The way that my physiological reaction to the medicine is going to be, that's going to be very different. So the only person who can make that decision is your doctor. You don't want to take that ability away from the doctor, right? But the question you're asking is that why is it that certain doctors prefer to prescribe either a certain maker or certain brand of medicine? That is the question you're asking. The only answer that I can give you is that during their practice, now, look, like anything else, there may be some black sheep. There may be some doctors who are influenced by the inducements that pharma companies give them. I'm not going to take that away from this conversation, because that's a reality. It's not just in India, everywhere else, pharmaceutical companies
do influence doctors in many cases.
Absolutely, because that's what drives sales. The point I'm trying to make here is that doctors over a period of time develop confidence in a brand or in a company that their products actually work in their patients. You cannot take that away from the practice of medicine. You have to defer to the judgment. But then you have to ask yourself, what is the role of the regulator? Why is it that certain medicines and over a certain period of time, doctors begin to gravitate towards certain brands or certain generics? You have to ask that question, is that based on their clinical practice, or is it based on an influence that a particular doctor is actually giving you? So those are the two things that you have, and this is where the role of a regulator comes in, right? You have, there's this case in Supreme Court now, they're talking about Dolo, right? The 650 milligram Dolo. And there are allegations that the company spent a lot of money promoting that during COVID.
Crores of rupees, yes.
Exactly. But then did you know that the governing regulation for how these pharmaceutical companies actually market their product is a voluntary code. It's not compulsory. How do you ensure compliance with the voluntary code? You come back again to asking me, do we have the right regulation in the country, right? You asked me this question before. If your laws are voluntary, how do you ensure compliance?
That's right. One question, sir, I would like to ask is, pharma industry is one of the biggest industries in India, as you know, and the government's, push is to promote at the center as well as state level to push the industry. Probably that's one of the reasons why they are, a bit lax with the norms. Sometimes many wrongdoings are sometimes ignored or put on the back burner. So do you think, of course, from public health point of view, it's really, really horrible. So do you think a balance is possible between, protecting the interests of the industry as well as people's health?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the right thing to do. You have to find a way to balance those two things. Look, we produce a large variety of medicines that are consumed both in developed countries and in developing countries. That's a fact. I mean, the United States healthcare system would not function but for India-made generics. That's how powerful this industry is, right? But the fact also remains is that the very same companies that make and sell product in the United States make product that product to a different standard. It's not the same standard that what they sell in the United States. There are two different sets of standards. When they make medicine for the United States, they comply with a very strict set of standards for the United States. But when they make it for our country, our consumption here, it's obviously a significantly lower set of standards. And the question is why, right? Now, the public health activists and the government argues that if you then make these companies comply with the same standards as the US, the cost of medicine is going to go up. In my opinion, that's actually that's a Sophie's choice. That is not true at all. There have been enough studies done in the United States and in Europe to show that compliance does not increase costs at all. In fact, I would make the other argument. What use is it for you to spend whatever little money that you have to buy something that doesn't work?
Yeah.
Right? So this binary choice that has been created in the mind of public and people, that somehow making the industry comply with the standard to produce a quality product somehow will make our industry go bankrupt, that's a bogus argument. I don't buy it for 1 second.
Yeah. So one issue with the Gambian issue right now, and of course I'm sure you have written about in your book as well, is this practice of issuing certificates by the, first the center and then state authorities. Sometimes these companies also claim that they are WHO certified. What are the problems in that arena?
So remember, let's take this company as this incident as an example, right? This company, so in order to export product to the overseas market, in the law today, we have nothing that, from the health point of view, we certainly have permissions that you need to get from a revenue point of view. So the Director General of Foreign Trade, if you want to sell your product overseas, requires you to get certification and registration so that they can monitor foreign exchange and the taxes that you need to pay for that, right? That is a revenue-related issue. As a manufacturer, if I have a license from my state to manufacture medicine, and if the buyer who's located outside of the country wants to buy medicine from me, I don't need any permission from the CDSCO. Now, if the buyer says that, look, can you get what is called a certificate of pharmaceutical quality? And the reason for that is very simple, right? Small country like Gambia, right, which buys medicine from us, they may not have the capacity, regulatory capacity, to monitor the way that we manufacture the medicines. So what do? They go back to the WHO and says, you're the World Health Body, you have the ability to establish, and go inspect all of these facilities overseas. Why don't you tell us if this manufacturer produces good quality medicine, right? This is where the WHO pre-qualifications program comes into the picture. The WHO comes, inspects, figures out that you're complying with their standards, and then you become a part of the WHO pre-qualifications program. Right. When people say it's a certification, it's not a certification. It's basically the WHO saying that we have inspected your facility, and we believe that you comply with the manufacturing standards. Now you're fit to supply to WHO. Exactly, right? So most of these companies, what they do is they take that as one criteria in their procurement. If the WHO has come in, they've looked at your manufacturing facility, the practices you employ, and you comply with good manufacturing practices, and you become part of the pre-qualifications program, that becomes a criteria for other countries that don't have the state capacity to buy from you, right? Those countries then come back and say, because remember, WHO does it once in several years. They don't come and inspect your facility every time, right? What the WHO does is it says, we leave it to the national regulator, right? In this case, it's the CDSCO. They say that it's in your country, you have the manufacturing facility in your country, the regulator in that country, please enforce compliance, right? And that is what the CDSCO gives as a piece of paper that's called the Certificate of Pharmaceutical Product, right? That paper basically says that we, National Regulator of India, have the confidence that this company is producing a quality product for you. That's all the certificate says, right? Now the question is, what does the CDSCO do in order to give you that certificate? I can't answer that question. You'll have to ask that question to the DCGI and the CDSCO, because I don't even know what process they follow in order to give that piece of paper, right? Is it just that you give a licensing fee, if you just go pay some money and you get
there's some documentation required and some inspection? That is what the process is.
I know what the regulation says. I know what the regulation says.
Yeah, but whether that happens.
And we come back to the same question you asked earlier, transparency, right? Nobody knows how they execute the process, right? If the CDSCO actually does what the regulation says or the guideline says, it says that before you issue a certificate of pharmaceutical product, you have to go inspect that facility. You have to ensure that people who are working in that facility have a certain amount of training, right? You have to have processes to make sure that if you're using raw material that you're buying from somebody, that you test that before you use it to make your product, right? Does the CDSCO do all of that before it gives the certificate of pharmaceutical product? Nobody knows. And if you ask the question, you don't get an answer.
Right. Absolutely right. Yeah. You must have seen the, a statement given by the Health Ministry, India's, that is government's official stand to it. There are many problem areas with that. Would you like to say something about that?
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to start, because, initially they said that the export license was issued by the state, not the central regulator. And I can't figure out how is that even possible. Are they talking about the manufacturer license? Because they don't clarify that. They say the license was given by the state regulator, right? So are they talking about the Haryana regulator? Are they talking about the manufacturing license, or are you talking about the certificate of pharmaceutical quality? Because if it's a certificate of pharmaceutical quality, if you go to the CDSCO website, it's listed there. It says right there that they've given a certificate to Made in Pharma. So what are they talking about, right? So I don't even know. I don't want to comment on what they're saying, because the thing is, they don't want to come and face. I mean, how about the CDSCO hold a press conference where you and other health journalists ask these questions of the DCGI? Hold a press conference.
That's a must. Right? That's a must, of course.
I mean, come in front of the press, explain to the press, you know what, I'm sorry this happened. It's not the first time that this has happened. This is what we are doing. We're working with the WHO to get samples of this particular product from Gambia. We're going to test that in the Central Drug Lab in Lucknow or Kolkata, wherever we want to test it. We are talking to the Haryana regulator, and we have sent a team to go and do the inspection of Made in Pharma. Why don't they come out and hold a press conference and answer these questions?
Well, thank you so much for your time, sir. Let's hope that this unfortunate incident, is the last of this kind, and this kind of incidents don't happen ever again. And there's some good changes that happen in the regulatory regime in India, drug regulatory regime in India. Thank you so much, and all the best for your work.